The Cleveland Browns just signed a tight end that nobody is paying attention to. And honestly, that might be exactly why you should be paying attention to it. Because this move did not happen in a vacuum. It happened right as Shedeur Sanders is reportedly preparing to make his very first career start against the Buffalo Bills. And on top of that, a former NFL quarterback just released what might be the most detailed film breakdown anyone has ever done on a single preseason interception. We are talking frame by frame, 30 times over, and what he found completely changes the conversation around that throw everybody has been roasting online. But here is where it gets really interesting. Local Cleveland media is starting to crack under the weight of this quarterback competition.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
One host went on air and basically said he is exhausted from hearing explanations every time Shedeur has a rough moment. And the tension between what the film actually shows and what the narrative wants to be true is reaching a breaking point heading into this Buffalo game. I am going to walk you through every single layer of this today. The roster move, the interception science, the media frustration, and what all of it actually means for Sunday. This is the NFL update, and if you care about what is really happening in Cleveland right now, not the hot takes, not the surface-level reactions, but the actual evidence, you are in the right place. Let us get into it. Now, before we go any further, drop a football emoji in the comments if you think Shedeur deserves that start against Buffalo. I want to see where this audience stands right now, because by the end of this video, you might feel completely different about this entire situation. Reports out of Cleveland confirmed the Browns signed tight end Jermaine Terry II to the roster, and to make room they waived tight end Brendan Bates with an injury settlement. Now on the surface, that sounds like the most boring transaction alert you have ever seen scroll across your phone. Another undrafted tight end in, another one out, business as usual in August across the NFL. But if you actually look at the details and more importantly the timing, this move starts to tell a much bigger story than a simple roster swap. Terry was originally signed by the New York Giants as an undrafted free agent last year, coming out of Oregon State. He did not last long there either, getting waived with an injury settlement attached before he ever saw a regular season snap. That path of bouncing from one roster to another through injury settlements is genuinely one of the most common journeys for tight ends specifically in this league. And the reason for that is simple. Tight end is a position where teams are constantly cycling bodies through camp, trying to find the exact right combination of size, blocking reliability, and dependable hands. It often takes 2 or 3 stops before a player lands somewhere his skill set actually matches what the coaching staff needs from that room. The Browns reportedly brought Terry in for a tryout last week, saw enough to like, and now the former Oregon State tight end has a fresh opportunity in Cleveland. By every account available, this is a big-bodied, physically stout player. The kind of tight end who wins with size and physicality rather than trying to run past linebackers in space. And adding that specific type of player to the room right now is not accidental. Think about what the Browns are staring at on the calendar. Their presumed starting quarterback is about to make his first career start against a legitimate NFL defense in Buffalo. A coaching staff that is genuinely invested in giving that quarterback every possible tool to succeed does not just sit on their hands and hope the current roster is enough. They go find another weapon. They add another option. They give the play caller one more card to put on the table when it matters most. Priority undrafted tryout signings happen constantly across the league in August. That part is not unusual. What makes this one worth flagging is the timing. Teams do not typically add a completely new player to a position room this close to a season opener unless they see a specific immediate role for that player. Whether that role is a red zone target who can win contested catches with his frame, a blocking piece who can help protect a young quarterback on the edge, or both, The Browns clearly identified a gap and moved to fill it before Sunday. And if you are watching this channel regularly, if you are locked in with the NFL update every single week, you already know that these small moves are the ones that end up mattering the most 3 months from now when we look back and connect the dots. Hit that subscribe button right now because we are tracking every single one of these moves all season long. And I promise you the channels that ignore roster transactions like this are the same ones that will act surprised when Terry catches a touchdown in November. Now let us get into the story that has genuinely taken over every Browns conversation online for the last several days. Shedeur Sanders threw an interception recently that on the surface looked bad. Not kind of bad, not borderline. It looked like a genuinely terrible throw. An overthrow that sailed well past its intended target and landed directly in a defender's hands. The kind of play that generates an instant reaction on social media where everybody races to be the first person to post the clip with a caption like, "This is your franchise quarterback," followed by 3 laughing emojis. And honestly, if all you saw was the clip, if all you had to go on was the 10-second highlight that made the rounds on every platform within minutes, I would not blame you for having that reaction. It looked rough. The ball went where it absolutely should not have gone, and the result was a turnover. In a vacuum, that is a bad play. Nobody is arguing otherwise. But here is where the conversation starts to split in a really interesting direction. Former NFL quarterback Chase Daniel, a guy who actually played the position at the highest level, went back and watched that specific throw roughly 30 times. Not a quick glance on his phone between meetings. Not a casual rewatch at normal speed while eating lunch. 30 times, frame by frame, looking at every single detail of Shedeur's drop, his grip, his release point, and the ball flight after it left his hand. And what Daniel found is something that a casual viewer would never catch in a million years. Right before the throw, you can actually see the football flip and spin in Shedeur's hand. Not once, twice. 2 distinct manipulations of the ball during the drop back, which to a trained quarterback eye is an enormous red flag that something is physically wrong with the grip. Daniel explained that when a quarterback does that specific motion, spinning the ball in his hand before the release, it almost always means moisture has gotten onto the surface of the football in a spot that interferes with the throwing hand's traction. Specifically, he pointed to the thumb area as the most likely culprit. Because the thumb is what provides the stabilizing pressure on the opposite side of the ball from the fingers during release. And if that surface is slick, the entire spiral and trajectory of the throw changes, no matter how clean the mechanics are everywhere else.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
This was not some vague theory thrown out on a podcast with no supporting evidence. This was a specific observable detail on the actual tape that Daniel pointed to as the basis for his entire analysis. The ball moved in Shedeur's hand twice before the throw. That is not normal. That is not something quarterbacks do when the ball is dry and the grip is clean. That is a quarterback trying to find a surface he can actually hold onto and throwing it anyway because the play clock and the defensive rush do not care whether your football is dry or not. What Daniel described was a mechanically clean decision paired with a mechanically compromised release. And that distinction is going to matter enormously as we dig deeper into what this actually means for how Shedeur should be evaluated heading into Buffalo. Chase Daniel did not just stop at identifying the ball movement in Shedeur's hand. He went further and explained the actual mechanics of how moisture gets onto a football during a game and why it affects throws in ways that most fans never think about. Here is how it works. Late in a game, or even late in an extended practice session, a center has been snapping the football over and over for 3 or 4 quarters worth of reps. His hands are sweating. That is not a criticism of the center. That is just basic human biology under physical exertion. Every single snap transfers a small amount of that moisture onto the surface of the football. Over the course of dozens of snaps, that moisture builds up. And it does not distribute evenly across the entire ball. It tends to concentrate in the specific spots where the center's hands make the most contact, which often overlaps with exactly where a quarterback's thumb needs to land for a clean grip. Daniel made the point that it does not matter how dry the rest of the football is. If that one specific spot where the throwing thumb sits is slick, the entire throw is compromised. The quarterback can have perfect footwork, perfect eye placement, a perfect read of the defense, and still have the ball come out wrong because the thumb slipped at the release point by a fraction of an inch. That fraction of an inch at release translates to feet of deviation by the time the ball travels 20 or 30 yards downfield, which is exactly what we saw on that interception. What impressed Daniel about Shedeur specifically was that you could see on the tape that Shedeur recognized the problem in real time and tried to correct for it. The two spins of the ball in his hand were not random fidgeting. They were a deliberate attempt to rotate the football to a drier surface before releasing it. Daniel called that genuinely impressive quarterback instinct under pressure, because most young quarterbacks in that situation would either not recognize the grip issue at all and just throw it blind, or they would hesitate too long trying to fix it and take a sack instead. Shedeur did neither. He identified the problem, attempted a correction, and still got the throw off on time. The correction just was not enough to fully overcome the moisture on his thumb at the exact moment of release, and the result was a throw that sailed further than intended and ended up in a defender's hands. This is why the NFL Update exists as a channel, because this level of detail, this kind of breakdown that actually explains what happened on a play instead of just reacting to the result, is exactly what separates real analysis from hot take content. And if you are someone who wants to actually understand the game at this level, you need to subscribe right now, because this is what we do here every single video. We do not just tell you what happened. We tell you why it happened and what it actually means going forward. Daniel's overall conclusion was straightforward. A miss that far off target from a quarterback with Shedeur's arm talent and mechanical profile usually does not happen from a clean, dry football. Something external had to be affecting the grip, and the visible evidence of the ball spinning twice in his hand before the throw, combined with the game situation of a late drive with a center who had been snapping for an extended period, pointed directly to center sweat as the most logical explanation. Now some of you are going to push back on that, and that is completely fine. Skepticism is healthy, but I want you to ask yourself one honest question before you dismiss this entirely. If this exact same interception happened to Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, and Chase Daniel came out with the exact same film breakdown showing the exact same ball manipulation in their hand before the throw, would you dismiss it just as quickly? Or would you nod along and say, yeah, that makes sense, grip issues happen, it is football? Be honest with yourself about that answer, because it matters more than you think. Let me take this one step further, because I think most casual fans genuinely do not understand how much the physical condition of the football matters to every single throw a quarterback makes at this level. A regulation, NFL football has a very specific texture built into the leather. Those little bumps and ridges on the surface are not decorative. They exist specifically so quarterbacks can generate consistent spin and grip pressure on every throw regardless of conditions. The entire aerodynamic profile of a spiral pass depends on the quarterback's ability to maintain precise thumb and finger pressure on a clean surface throughout the throwing motion. The moment any part of that surface gets slick, the physics of the throw change completely. Even if the quarterback's mechanics stay exactly the same, even if his feet are perfect, even if his eyes are in the right place, even if his arm angle and release timing are identical to the throw before it. A wet spot on the ball at the wrong location changes the outcome of the throw in ways the quarterback cannot fully control once the ball leaves his hand. This is exactly why you see teams carry towels on the sideline. It is why centers wipe the ball down between snaps in bad weather games. It is why some of the greatest deep ball throwers in league history, guys whose arm talent was never questioned by anybody, have talked openly in interviews about grip feel being one of the very first things that deteriorates when conditions get tough. Peyton Manning used to be obsessive about ball preparation before games. Tom Brady had an entire controversy years ago built around the pressure and feel of footballs. Aaron Rodgers has spoken publicly about preferring specific ball conditions for his throwing style. These are not fringe concerns from mediocre quarterbacks looking for excuses. These are foundational elements of the position that the best to ever play it took extremely seriously. Now here is where the context of this being a preseason or camp situation matters even more. In a regular season game, the starting unit gets premium attention from the equipment staff. Towels are readily available. Ball boys are rotating footballs in and out. The center and quarterback have established routines for managing ball conditions throughout the game. Everything is dialed in because the stakes demand it. In camp and preseason, especially when a second team unit is on the field, that level of attention to detail can slip. Not because anybody is being negligent, but because the infrastructure around those reps simply is not the same as what the starting group gets during a real game. A center working with the second team might not have a towel immediately available between every snap. The equipment rotation might not be as tight. Small details that seem insignificant in isolation can add up to exactly the kind of situation Daniel described, where a quarterback ends up throwing a football that has accumulated enough moisture to affect his grip at the worst possible moment. None of this means the interception does not count. It still happened. It is still on the stat sheet. But if we are trying to project what Shedeur Sanders actually is as a quarterback, and whether that throw tells us something meaningful about his decision-making ability, the physical context of the throw matters enormously. Because a quarterback who makes the right read, identifies a grip problem in real time, attempts a correction, and still gets the throw off on time, is showing you a very different set of skills than a quarterback who simply made a bad decision and threw the ball where he should not have. Now let us get into what local Cleveland media had to say about the broader quarterback competition, because this part of the conversation took a really interesting turn. There is clearly frustration building among certain segments of the local coverage around how frequently explanations and context have been offered every single time Shedeur has a rough moment in camp or preseason. One host in a particularly pointed segment joked about being exhausted trying to predict what the next explanation would be. First, it was the pressure and a tough situation. Then it was a wet ball, and he sarcastically speculated about what might come next, joking about everything from environmental factors to conspiracy-level theories, basically communicating that he has reached a point of total fatigue with what he sees as a pattern of excuse-making every time something goes wrong. But here is where that same host actually landed, and I think this part deserves real attention because it is significantly more nuanced than just dunking on Shedeur for content. He was completely upfront that he personally never wanted the Browns to trade for Deshaun Watson in the first place, going back years. And he said he does not want Watson to be the starter now either. That is a level of transparency you genuinely do not get from a lot of media voices covering any team in any sport. And I respect it even when I disagree with parts of his analysis. His honest read, in his own words, was that one quarterback has simply played better than the other two through this stretch of camp and preseason. Not because that quarterback had some enormous talent advantage or some scheme advantage that the other two did not get, since none of these three guys are working with some historically dominant supporting cast around them, but just based on the actual on-field results as he has observed them. He made the point that he is not interested in manufacturing every possible excuse just to make himself feel better about an outcome he does not personally want. And he predicted that Shedeur will eventually get his shot at the starting job, but that based on what he has seen so far, it likely will not come in week 1. Now here is where I want to push back a little, because I think there is a real tension in that take that is worth examining closely. On one hand, he is calling out excuse-making as exhausting and unproductive. That is a fair position. Nobody wants to listen to a new reason every single week for why a bad play was not actually bad. On the other hand, he is making his own broad sweeping judgment that one guy has clearly outplayed the other two based on a very small and very noisy sample size. A sample that includes exactly the kind of play, like that interception, where a credible evidence-based explanation exists and was laid out in forensic detail by someone who actually played the position professionally. If we are being consistent about not jumping to conclusions based on limited information, that standard has to cut in both directions. It is absolutely fair to be skeptical of excuses that do not hold up under scrutiny. It is a completely different thing to dismiss an explanation that does hold up under scrutiny, simply because you are tired of hearing explanations in general. Those are two very different intellectual positions, and I think it is important to name that distinction clearly. I want to dig into something that I think gets at the core of how quarterback conversations play out across sports media in general, because this Cleveland situation is a perfect case study for a much bigger pattern. There is a real phenomenon that I would call an interpretation penalty, where young or unproven quarterbacks get evaluated under a completely different lens than established players do, even when the actual on-field results are comparable. Here is how it works. A veteran quarterback throws an interception, and the immediate reaction across media and fan bases is just football, tough break. He will bounce back. A rookie or a second-year guy throws an interception, and suddenly it becomes a referendum on whether he is ready, whether the team made a mistake investing in him, whether his entire future is in question based on a single throw. Both of those framings cannot be simultaneously correct. Either interceptions are meaningful data points that deserve scrutiny and context regardless of who throws them, or they are isolated events that do not define a player. You have to pick one standard and apply it consistently. I'm not accusing any specific host or analyst of doing this intentionally. And to his credit, the Cleveland host we discussed earlier was at least self-aware enough to acknowledge his own bias against wanting Watson to succeed. That kind of honesty is rare in sports media, and it deserves recognition even when the analysis itself has gaps. But the pattern of young quarterbacks getting the least charitable interpretation of every single negative play, while veterans get the benefit of the doubt on identical plays, is real, and it is everywhere once you start looking for it. There is also a sample size problem that gets completely lost in these conversations. When someone says one guy has played better than the other two, the immediate follow-up question should always be over what exact window and under what exact conditions. Camp practices against your own defense, where the defense knows your tendencies and your play calls because they practice against them every single day. Joint practices against another team's defense. One preseason half here, a quarter there. None of that individually, and honestly, none of it collectively adds up to anywhere close to a real evaluation sample. That is not me making excuses for anybody. That is basic statistical reality. If you flipped a coin 10 times and it came up heads 7 times, you would not conclude the coin was rigged. You would want significantly more flips before drawing any real conclusion. Quarterback evaluation is obviously not a coin flip. There is real skill and real signal embedded in what we have seen, but the sample is still small enough that treating any single stretch as a definitive verdict is premature, no matter which quarterback you are talking about. Simple stories travel faster than complicated ones. That is the fundamental incentive structure of sports media, and I will be the first to admit that my own channel, the NFL Update, operates inside that same incentive structure. Watson looked better is a much easier headline, a much easier clip, a much easier talking point than Watson looked better across a small sample that includes several plays with specific extenuating circumstances worth examining individually. The simple version generates more clicks, more shares, more heated comment sections. That does not automatically make the simple version wrong, but it does mean the simple version deserves the exact same scrutiny as any other claim rather than being treated as settled truth just because it got repeated across enough different shows and channels. Let us zoom out and talk about what all of this actually means heading into Shedeur Sanders' first career start against the Buffalo Bills, because this is the moment every single storyline from camp has been building toward. Every conversation about reps, every debate about the depth chart, every dissection of every single interception, all of it funnels directly into this one game on Sunday.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
And the timing of that Jermaine Terry signing suddenly looks a lot more significant when you frame it this way. A big-bodied, physically stout tight end just got added to this roster specifically, as Shedeur is preparing for his first real NFL start. A tight end who can win in contested catch situations gives a young quarterback something invaluable: a built-in answer against pressure and against tight coverage. A target he can trust to go up and make a play with his frame even when the throw is not surgically precise. That kind of safety valve matters more in a debut start than almost any other single roster addition, because it takes some of the pressure off having to be perfect on every single throw right out of the gate. If Terry ends up seeing real reps against Buffalo, do not be surprised if he becomes one of the first options on third down or in the red zone. Those are exactly the situations where a first-time starter benefits most from having a large catch radius to throw to. Coordinators love pairing a young quarterback with that kind of security blanket early, because it simplifies the decision-making on obvious passing downs, without forcing him to fit the ball into windows that are tighter than what he is ready for at this point in his development. Now let us talk about what a strong debut would actually look like so we have a real benchmark once Sunday arrives. I am not looking for a perfect game. Nobody should expect perfection from a first career start against a real opponent with a real defensive game plan built specifically to attack him. Buffalo is not going to roll out a vanilla scheme and let Shedeur get comfortable. They are going to test him with pressure looks, with disguised coverages, with everything they can throw at him to see how a young quarterback responds under genuine stress. What I want to see is exactly what we have been tracking all camp long: clean decision-making, checkdowns taken when they are available instead of forcing something downfield that is not there, shots taken when the defense actually presents the opportunity, ball security maintained even when the pocket is collapsing and the rush is in his face. That is the profile of a quarterback who is ready, even if the stat line is not flashy, and even if there is another interception mixed in. Because here is what people forget: interceptions in a debut start are not automatically disqualifying. Some of the best quarterbacks in league history threw picks in their first starts. What matters is the process behind the decisions, not just the outcomes. If Shedeur can put together a game where the decisions are consistently sound, even if one or two throws do not land perfectly, that tells us infinitely more about his readiness than any camp practice tracker or preseason highlight reel ever could. Because it is coming against a defense that actually game planned for him, specifically, rather than one that sees him every single day and already knows his tendencies inside and out. And if you are watching this channel every week, if the NFL update is part of your routine heading into the season, you already know we are going to break that game down in complete detail the moment it is over. Every throw, every decision, every moment that matters. Subscribe right now so you do not miss that breakdown, because I promise you it is going to be one of the most important videos we put out all year. I want to address directly what some of the reporting has framed as a potential front office narrative push, because I think it is important to be careful here and not just run with a theory without being transparent about what is and is not actually confirmed. The framing in a lot of the coverage around this competition suggests the organization might be intentionally leaning into a storyline where Watson gets credit for looking better regardless of what the actual tape and detailed analysis show, potentially to justify a decision that has already been made behind closed doors about who starts Week 1. I am not going to sit here and tell you that is definitely what is happening because I do not have any direct confirmation of that beyond speculation from media members who, just like the rest of us, are reading tea leaves from the outside. What I will say is this. If the eye test and a detailed frame-by-frame film breakdown from a former NFL quarterback are both pointing toward legitimate mitigating context on some of these Shedeur mistakes, and public commentary keeps flattening that context into simple turnover counting, that disconnect is worth being skeptical about. Whether it is a deliberate front office narrative or just the natural result of how complex football analysis simplifies itself once it hits mainstream sports media. But here is the part that I think actually matters more than any media speculation. Look at the actions. The Browns just added a new offensive weapon to the tight end room right as Shedeur is heading into his first career start. That is a strange thing to do if the goal is to set him up to fail. That is a strange thing to do if the organization has already decided he is not the guy and is just going through the motions of a fake competition. Teams that are genuinely trying to suppress a young quarterback's opportunity do not go out and sign players who make his job easier days before his biggest moment. Actions tend to speak louder than depth chart wording or one segment's framing of a practice stretch. And the action here, signing a big physical tight end to give Shedeur another target in his first start, tells a very different story than the narrative that this competition is already decided, and the organization is just looking for reasons to justify going with someone else. I also think it is worth asking what it would actually look like if the competition were genuinely rigged versus what it looks like when a coaching staff is simply taking its time with a close decision. If this were truly predetermined, you would expect to see permanently reduced reps for Shedeur with no further opportunities in live game situations. You would expect the depth chart to stop even pretending to be open. You would expect zero investment in players who might help him succeed. Instead, what we have seen is continued reps, a scheduled start against a real opponent, and a new weapon added to the room days before that start. That does not look like an organization trying to bury somebody. That looks like an organization trying to make a genuinely informed decision based on the most complete information possible. Now, none of this guarantees Shedeur wins the job, and none of this means the host who expressed frustration is wrong about everything he said. Quarterback competitions are messy and subjective and full of competing perspectives that all contain pieces of the truth without any single one capturing the whole picture. What I am asking for is consistency. Evaluate the evidence on its merits. Take the film breakdown seriously when it presents specific visible proof. Take the skepticism seriously when it raises legitimate questions. And let Sunday's game provide the next real piece of evidence before anybody declares this competition over in either direction. Here is where I want to leave you today. The teams that succeed long-term at the quarterback position are almost always the ones willing to separate the noise from the signal week after week without overreacting to a great play or a bad one in isolation. That is exactly what we try to do here at the NFL Update with every single breakdown. Some weeks that means giving credit where it is earned. Other weeks it means pointing out a real flaw that needs to be fixed. This week it means taking a documented evidence-based explanation seriously instead of dismissing it, because it is easier to stay skeptical, while also acknowledging that a brand new tight end just walked into that room to make Shedeur's job a little bit easier heading into the biggest moment of his career so far. Debut starts for young quarterbacks have gone every possible direction in recent memory. From immediate signature performances to rough, humbling afternoons that still ended up being the most valuable learning experience of the entire season. There is no single script that determines what Sunday looks like against Buffalo, and I would rather walk into that game with realistic expectations than either wild hype or doom based on one interception and one film breakdown. Drop your prediction for Shedeur's stat line against Buffalo in the comments right now. I read every single one, and I will be down there going back and forth with you before and after the game. This is the NFL Update. We are covering every roster move, every game breakdown, and every quarterback decision all season long so you never miss a single detail. Subscribe right now so you do not miss the full breakdown of Shedeur's first career start, because that game is about to give us more real answers than anything we have covered up to this point. I will see you on the next one.